have each of you give what you believe is the most important issue in District 1. But the other question that was left on our cards was, what is your feeling about a monopoly here for our ambulance services, such as we have now with Mayor Harvey Hall? And do we start with Mr. Freeland or Ms. Hess?
Okay, could you repeat that? First of all, you said,
what is your opinion on having a monopoly on the ambulance services, such as we have in Kern County with Mayor Harvey Hall?
Okay.
Do you think this needs to be broken up and have more ambulance services other than the one supplied?
Okay, and then was there a first part of that question?
When everyone is finished, we'll give you all a chance to tell what you believe is the most important issue in District 1.
I know up where we live, we don't have that ambulance service, so just so you know that. I believe in competition. I believe in open competition. The more competition you have, the price comes down, the more reasonable the price is for that particular service. Because I don't live down in Bakersfield, I'll be honest with you, I don't know how long the Hall Ambulance has been contracted with Kern County. And I know that there was an incident up in the Tehachapi area that occurred, way back in February, I think it was. And at that point in time, I thought, you know, we really do need to look at this. So one thing that I would promise is that I would look to not just having one contractor. I think that you need to spread the wealth.
Thank you.
I too believe in free enterprise and competition. It provides for cheaper service, and you maintain your quality. And I think it's the right way to do it. And it's not just Hall Ambulance, and it's any franchise out there ought to be looked at and find out if the monopoly is such that service is reduced and the cost of it's going up. So I think any franchise ought to be open for review and change from time to time.
Mr. Holloway.
I'm open to a public competitive bidding process. Some things I've run into, the big issue that we had in Ridgecrest recently was trash and evergreen contracts, which basically are contracts that renew automatically every year for another 10 years. And my concern would be, I would absolutely open it up to a competitive bidding process, but the most recent example I had in Ridgecrest was on like taxi cab service. They wanted to have a second taxi cab service in Ridgecrest, which diluted the market so much that both taxi cab services would go out of business. So my concern would be, I don't like a monopoly, but if I'm not having a monopoly would create a higher cost to the taxpayer, then that's not a benefit either. So if there's not a big enough market to support 3 or 4 ambulance services, then a monopoly may be the best way to go. But you shouldn't give them more than, I would say, a 5-year contract at the most, because one of the concerns with the contracts, anytime you've got capital costs, is they need to be able to if they're going to invest in new vehicles and new facilities to do the maintenance on those vehicles, they have to have a mechanism to recover their costs. And the best example I would give you is if you would have told me I had to build a Wiener Schnitzel in any city, and at the end of 5 years I had to tear it down and move, I couldn't sell it or do anything else. That's why you have some of these contracts that on the surface don't appear like they make much sense. So I don't like monopolies. You got to have a competitive bidding process, and you need to do it often. But sometimes a monopoly may be the cheapest way to get the best benefit for the taxpayer. And I know nothing about Mayor Hall or what is it, Hall Ambulance. We deal with Liberty Ambulance in Ridgecrest, so I don't know anything about the intimate knowledge of how Hall Ambulance operates. I just, as a general principle, that's what I would follow.
Thank you, Mr. Ashton.
We have a non-exclusive franchise ordinance in the county. That means non-exclusive. And in recent history, we had 2 major ambulance companies serving the Bakersfield metropolitan area, Golden Empire Ambulance and Hall Ambulance Service. In the spirit of the private enterprise system, Hall Ambulance acquired the other ambulance company. So a business grew and provided jobs. And has already been mentioned, we have other ambulance ownership in other communities in Kern County. We have competition in those areas. Let me just offer one other suggestion in terms of what happens if we don't have a strong private enterprise operated pre-hospital care. Believe me, our fire departments in both the county and the city would like to get into the paramedic and the pre-hospital emergency medical transport business. So you can imagine the difference if we had that service provided through government employees or whether it's provided through the private enterprise system as it is today.
Thank you. Mrs. Sedero.
Who's the first on scene? Can they treat you? Can they do what you need to make sure that your life is saved? The answer to the first question in almost every situation is going to be the fire department, because that's what they do. They're the first responders. Sometimes government can be the competition, because what happened in Las Vegas when I lived there 20 years ago is they had one ambulance company, and the fire departments started doing the paramedic services because the response times had gone to 7 minutes. Now, Hall is doing a good job with the response time, but the biggest problem that exists right now is that not only do we have a dysfunctional EMS system, but it's actually headed by someone who used to work for Hall. There is so many layers to this issue that when you start peeling this onion, you're going to cry because of the double billing, because Hall Ambulance taking people to hospitals where they already know that the ER is closed, so that they not only get to charge once for the transport, but a second time to take them to the other hospital. It doesn't affect your bottom line. Oh, I'm sorry, yes it does, because it means your insurance rates go up when it comes to ambulance transport. This is an onion that needs to be peeled, and it needs to be looked at carefully, and EMS is the place to start, because all I care about is if I'm on the 14 going to Ridgecrest with my family, and there's a rollover accident, I want the closest helicopter taking my children to Madera. And I don't care whose job it is. If it's sitting in California City, it's taking my daughters to the hospital instead of waiting for one coming from Fraser Park. We have got to look at it like every issue, and it's got to be about the customer. It's got to be about the care, and not about the money that's to be made. And I do believe in the 1st District, this is a very good place to be looking at firefighter paramedics, not as competition. I don't care about competition, I care about lives being saved.
Thank you, Mr. Gleason.
This is an easy one for me. I'm a firm believer in, like I said earlier, the primary responsibility of county supervisor is providing for the safety of its citizens. I think that the best way to do that, in my initial thought and where I lean on this, is to allow free markets to work and to allow a process where you open the bid and you bring these bids in, you analyze these bids and get a feel for who's saying what, who's doing what, and what, establishing a criteria for ranking the best value of any proposal that's submitted. But I would certainly support a free market approach to solving the problem.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Julie needed to go cough in private. The last question, and